Welcome. I'm Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion. And what an interesting couple of days that we've been going through. This week already has been pretty striking and interesting. And yesterday, no different. Matter of fact, yesterday, we started off the day, we had some pressure on the Dow, but the NASDAQ was actually fighting it. And there was this dislocation and suddenly, as the market started to progress through the day, we started to see a little bit of that lift and we started to see a little bit of participation and started to move back up into what felt like a fairly comfortable day. But sooner, before you could even imagine that, the rug was pulled out. A lot of people started to have concerns about Moderna and looking a little bit deeper into this vaccine and where things are. And we did talk about this. We talked about early stages and people having to understand it might be a little premature to jump too aggressively, too fast, but people are just looking for that ray of light, right? And that's what I think has been a big part of what we've seen. And we've seen this in the market on many occasions with Gilead in the past, and now here we are with Moderna and the size and the scope. And I think there's a lot of concerns. Well, that really depressed the markets in terms of a big push to the downside. We started to slide, and with that slide, it included everybody. Early on, you're talking about energy and industrials and those kinds of names, but I think you started to see a lot of the other names actually start participating in the sell-off as well. And this did affect the NASDAQ. And so the stay-at-home names, all of that, use whatever phrase you want, but everything was starting to get pushed to the downside on a move that actually extended and started pushing the markets further and further to the downside, closing on the lows virtually of the Dow, of the NASDAQ, and across the board. So it really was an interesting day. There's no doubt about it. Volatility started to creep back up. We got back up towards that 30. The interesting aspect, I think, of yesterday was it was an interesting day because of where we started to move towards in the middle parts of the day, and then that big sell-off. And when you see something like that, you really would almost expect to see a little bit more of a violent move in the volatility index. We really didn't see that. The volatility index did get back up above 30. And, we talk about this all the time, but just to remind everybody, you hit a 32 on the VIX. That's essentially, and 30 is pretty close. That's essentially saying, hey, look, we're going to expect a 2% move every single day in the S&P. So that is part of the whole process of looking and where is the volatility. And actually, given the moves that we were getting yesterday, the volatility index actually maybe could have stretched a little bit more to the upside, but it did not. And now today, wow. You come in and it's a brand new day. That news seems to be old news already. And now the new news is, hey, let's focus on the markets for today. And it's really pretty interesting. A lot of people looking at the earnings, and obviously we're well throughout this earnings season, but there are still plenty of different names. And as we get into this block of the earnings season, a lot of the retail names, a lot of people have been looking forward to this. We've had Walmart, we've had now Target, we've had all these various names. And people are sort of digesting what's going on here and where we are. And I think a lot of the data that people are now going back to is the data for the coronavirus now that things are starting to open up. And not only opening up, but opening up at a very fast pace, it feels like, across the country. And knock on wood, so far so good as far as what we're seeing, but obviously there's at least a week or a 2 week, probably a lag. So that's something, don't want to be premature on this one either. So the reality is that people are feeling a little bit more comfortable. People are feeling like maybe we're starting to open up and the economy can start moving again, with the markets today up about 400 points right now as we speak. And we're only about a little over an hour into the trading session, hour and a half into the trading session. You look at the major averages right now, all of them over 1.5% to the upside. A nice move there. You look at the volatility index, that's still trading right around, call it 28.5, close to 29. So that seems to be about right. It seems like, given the backdrop of what we're seeing right now. What we haven't touched on as much lately has been this quiet and methodical move that we are seeing in gold. We were talking about gold needing to hold on to and was holding on to that 1700 number. Gold's moving up towards 1750. And this has been a very interesting, quiet move that I don't think that we've seen a lot of talk about this on the networks and in a lot of other places in terms of folks that are kicking around financials and what's going on. Oil is the other story. Now that one has been talked about a lot, but you look at the price of oil up towards 32, actually pushing towards 33, up another 2.25% today. That's a pretty substantial move as well. So you can see sort of the backdrop of some of the commodities at this point in time and the participation you're seeing there. As I said, very quietly, you look over at gold, you see it trading around 1750. I don't know that everybody's really fully paying attention to that right now. Now, great participation where? Well, again, financials. There is something to be said for on some of these days lately where we have seen financials and energy just kind of working in concert to the upside. So energy up well over 2.5% now. Financials up about 2%. Industrials up over 2%. You got the typical names that are actually moving a lot of these stocks. You look at Boeing right now. Boeing actually with a nice solid move to the upside, well over a 3% move there. And then, of course, the chips. We talk about tech all the time. And individually, let's just look at the semiconductors themselves. You got names like Western Digital, you've got NXPI. Matter of fact, I've got an unusual for you that's going to be in the chip sector, but really nice participation. And how about those airlines? And the new CEO of United Airlines on CNBC early this morning, a great interview there, but talking about starting to see at least a loosening up of maybe people getting a little bit more comfortable. Not saying anything is off the charts and they're just seeing everything, but they're starting to see a slow pickup to the upside. And we all know it's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot of time for air travel. And that's probably still a long way out. But that's something that was discussed today. And he's starting to see, this new CEO, starting to see that there are folks that are starting to at least get a little bit more involved. Numbers aren't nearly as bad as they were if you go back into the early parts of April. So that's pretty interesting. Now, from a tech perspective, we're getting some great participation there as well, because as a matter of fact, you look at the NASDAQ right now, it's up just under 2% on this move to the upside, over 165 points on this move to the upside. Apple, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, sound pretty familiar? Those are the names, but it is interesting. And Facebook really rocketing to the upside today. That's really the standout right now. We had some great unusual option activity in Facebook yesterday, buying the very short term, the Friday expiring options. Those are already well deep into the money. They were the 220 strike. I've seen Facebook. The last I looked, it was up over 227. So a really nice, solid, powerful move to the upside out of Facebook. Now, let's get a little unusual activity, right? I mentioned the chips. Now, there are multiple different names I could have picked from today in terms of our unusual option activity in the chip space. But I picked this one, and here's why. It's an interesting name. It's the big name, and whenever people talk about various names in the semiconductor space, they always talk about this as the old school name, Intel. Well, that might be true, but this is a stock that's making a very nice move, and it's been very methodical, solid move to the upside. Still trades at PEs that I think are a lot easier for a lot of people to digest, and still have that great dividend yield as well. But forget all that for right now. How about the fact that the stock trading a little over $62 a share, and they're buying almost 7,000 of, not this Friday, but the following May 29th. They're buying those calls at the 62.5 strike. And they're paying not a whole lot of money when you consider these are basically at the money calls. They've got a week and a half before expiration, and they're trading around 77 cents all the way up to about $1.25, somewhere in that sort of a range. So that stood out for me because this is a name that's been on a nice steady move to the upside, along with some of the names that have made some violent moves to the upside. We talk about NVIDIA all the time. There's a variety of other names. AMD is a very frequent hitter on the unusual options activity. Micron we've talked about not too terribly long ago, but Intel, it's kind of the old standard when you're talking about chip stocks, and seeing this paper today just gives me a fairly comfortable feeling of the fact that I already own the stock, probably be owning some of these calls before the end of the day. But this actually did stand out for me because as I'm looking, we had all kinds of activity. We had multiple different hits in the chip space. But this name, it's just one of those names that always stands out. It's like Microsoft when you're talking about in the tech industry, and it's other names. You just look to some of those old standard names. I do. I like when I see something like this, and so I find it pretty interesting. I'm wearing the lime green shirt, and why? Because May is Lyme Awareness Week, Lyme Disease Awareness Month, rather, excuse me. And it's a time where, my wife, we've got Twin Cities Lyme Foundation. I want to give her a shout out. Does a great job raising awareness in the Twin Cities, but actually even globally. There are all kinds of people who come to the site, a lot of great information there, a lot of great doctors from around the country that are parts of giving us information and helping us out as much as we can. And she just does an absolutely great, incredible job of hard work on that Lyme awareness for people and early diagnosis, which is so important. So keep that in mind. If you start feeling kind of flu-like and you've already gone and checked out the coronavirus, all these other things, and I'm not joking around to say this, but you know what? The Lyme disease is a brutal disease, and you want to catch that quick. And that's why this month, May, Lyme Awareness Month, is something that's very, very near and dear to me as well. Folks, have a great day of trading. Always educate yourself. Market Rebellion, we do an incredible job of getting out there. You've got to have that educational side. You don't want to be one of these people who jumps into something without all the knowledge that they need and then does not have any success, and then that turns into a problem. So you want to have at least all the building blocks of a foundation so you can really fully understand what the risks are and what exactly all the different pricing mechanisms that go into the options world. It's still incredible. A little bit less volume, by the way, yesterday. I didn't mention that. Yesterday, surprising drop in volume from where we were, but a very interesting day nonetheless. Folks, this is the Market Rebellion. We're here for you. Giddy up.